Question number 6, Metira Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, and I just want to acknowledge the New Zealand Sign Language interpretation that's happening in the House today. It's fantastic. So my question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Supplementary question, Metira Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How poor does a child need to be under his definitional difference that he told Paul Henry about yesterday when he claimed there were only 60,000 to 100,000 children living in poverty?
Speaker,
the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The advice I have from the MSD Material Deprivation Index is that there are indeed between 60 and 100,000 children who are living in more severe material hardship. They are children who, based on that index, lack 9 to 11 items from that deprivation index.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metira Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Under his definitional difference, is a child living in poverty if their parents can't afford to buy them fresh food, if they don't have 2 pairs of shoes, can't afford a school uniform, and if they don't have their own bed?
Mr Speaker,
the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'll refer the member to the MSD's Material Deprivation Index.
Supplementary question, Metira Turei.
Is the Children's Commissioner wrong, and his experts who worked on the solutions to child poverty wrong, when they state that there are between 180,000 and 200,000 children who are materially deprived? That is, they go without 3 or more essential items, such as fresh food, warm clothes, their own bed and good shoes.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, it seems to me the member picks and chooses her index depending on what suits her argument. But all I can tell the member is if one looks at the children who are deemed to be in the most significant level of deprivation in New Zealand, based on the MSD index at 60 to 100,000. But I would say, Mr Speaker, this government is very focused on all children, particularly those that are less well off, and there's degrees of how less well off they are. That's why the government introduced free GP visits. That's why the government has put more money into providers like KidsCan. That's why this government has worked alongside Fonterra and Sanitarium to provide free breakfasts. It's why the government has supported social workers in all low decile schools. It's why the government has introduced children's teams to work with at-risk children and families. It's why the government has insulated every state house, and it's why the government has worked to insulate 240,000 other homes and given them clean heating. Mr Speaker, this is a government who, through the very worst of times in New Zealand, maintained benefits and entitlements that provide support for the very children that member's talking about.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Metira Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did the Ministry of Social Development fail to give him the 2014 Brian Perry report that shows that there are 260,000 children in poverty and 205,000 of them are living in severe poverty where their children earn less than half the median income?
Mr Speaker,
the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The member will refer, if she wants to refer to that particular report that she's talking about, how consistent there has been the numbers that she's talking about at that level of deprivation. In fact, there were about 240,000, 260,000 children under Labor at the height of what was theoretically an economic boom. But, Mr Speaker, what I can say is that Brian Perry's new annual reports, and the new edition will be out very soon, will make it quite clear that in terms of what they define as severe material hardship, there are between 60 and 100,000 children, and they have between 9 and 11 conditions on the deprivation index.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metira Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Prime Minister agree that by promising to tackle child poverty and then changing the definition of poverty to exclude most of the children who are actually poor, he is breaking yet another budget promise?
Right Honourable
Speaker,
Prime Minister.
I think the member's being extremely selective with the comments I've made. If she actually goes back and looks at the interviews that I've done on this topic ever since actually the last election, she'll see that I've consistently said that there's actually a disagreement between ourselves and those who claim that there are 260,000 children in that category. We've made it quite clear that we see a group of 60 to 100,000 as our priority. It doesn't mean that we don't provide either services or support for the wider group, we actually do, and I listed a great many, I won't repeat them now, but our primary area of focus and attention is on those who are most in need. And I think most New Zealanders actually would say that the government having a focus on those who are in the worst of conditions is actually putting our resources in the right place.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Supplementary to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by his previous statements in this House that there are many measures of child poverty, to his position now, which there is just one, material deprivation, which just so happens to be the smallest of all the measures that are used by the Children's Commissioner?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
And I stand by the view that there is no one single measure, but I'm simply saying that the Material Deprivation Index is the advice that we've had from MSD that it's the best. And so that is one measure, but there is no one single measure of poverty in New Zealand. I don't think there should be.
Order. Supplementary question, Metira Turei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister just admit that he has made up an Oliver Twist definition of poverty so that he can ignore some 200,000 New Zealand children who suffer from poverty every day?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think the member risks being a little bit silly. I mean, the government has actually, and I have listed a few moments ago, a very wide range of support we provide for all New Zealand children, and in some cases, obviously much more focused on those that are in need. Mr. Speaker, I've made it quite clear that I think there's a group who are in worse hardship than others, and that is supported by the Material Deprivation Index, which evolved actually from the European equivalent. It's a very thoughtful process that Brian Perry goes through, and it looks at very detailed analysis. And I think, again, I'm more than happy to have the debate with the New Zealand public, but I think you might find that the New Zealand public support the view that those who are most in need deserve the most support. That doesn't mean that other children don't get support. They actually do. But this government is very focused on that group, and I think most New Zealanders would say that's the right thing to do. The member shakes her head, but if we followed her economic policies, the whole million of New Zealand children would be in hardship because none of their parents would be in work.
Order. Question number 7, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.